An alien girl consumed by rage, until a human did something that changed everything. The planet Taurus was once known as one of the most beautiful worlds in its star system. Its skies glowed with soft violet lights every night. Rivers shined with blue energy, and giant crystal forests covered most of the land. Creatures made of light floated through the air, and the ocean sparkled like stars. For thousands of years, the peaceful alien species called the Valari lived there in harmony. They were a calm and thoughtful people. The Valari believed emotions were powerful and should be treated with care. Anger and hatred were rare among them. Instead, they valued understanding, patience, and unity. But that peaceful world changed the day the war arrived. Years ago, a massive conflict known as a galactic resource war spread across many star systems. Different alien civilizations fought for rare materials, energy sources, and territory. Humanity had entered the galaxy not long before the war began. Compared to older civilizations, humans were still new to interstellar travel, but they were fast learners, creative thinkers, and extremely determined. Some species admired them, others feared them, and on Taurus, humans became a symbol of destruction. During the war, an enemy faction secretly built hidden bases on the planet. They used Taurus as a place to hide their weapons and fleets. Human forces eventually discovered the enemy presence. What followed was a disaster. Human warships attacked the enemy forces from orbit. Huge explosions lit up the skies. Powerful weapons struck the surface as both sides fought for control. Cities burned. Crystal forests shattered. Entire regions were destroyed. Many Valari died during the conflict. The enemy was eventually defeated, but the damage to Taurus could never be fully repaired. For most Valari, the war ended with sorrow and quiet rebuilding. But for one young girl, the war left something much darker. Her name was Lyra. Lyra had been very young when the attacks happened. Before the war, she lived in a small coastal city called Alaris, where tall crystal towers grew naturally from the ground like shining trees. Her parents were scholars who studied the emotional energy fields of their planet. They often told Lyra that understanding others was the key to peace. Lyra loved exploring the crystal beaches near her home. She would collect glowing shells and watch the floating creatures that drifted above the ocean. Life was simple. Life was safe. Then the warships came. One night, the peaceful violet sky filled with bright flashes of light. Sirens echoed through the city. The ground shook as distant explosions thundered across the horizon. Lyra remembered the fear in her mother's eyes as they ran to the crowded streets toward a shelter. She remembered the loud roar of ships flying overhead. She remembered the moment everything changed. A massive explosion struck near the city center. The shockwave shattered buildings and sent glowing crystal fragments flying through the air. Lyra was thrown across the ground. Her ears rang. Dust filled the sky. When she finally opened her eyes again, the world looked completely different. The beautiful towers of Alaris were broken. Flames burned everywhere. And her parents were gone. Lyra survived. Many others did too. Rescue teams eventually pulled her from the rubble and brought her to one of the remaining Valari settlements. But something inside her had changed forever. The gentle emotions that her people valued so much were replaced with a single powerful feeling: anger. As she grew older, Lyra listened to the stories of the war again and again. She heard about the enemy faction that had hidden on Taurus, but she also heard about the human fleets that had attacked the planet. To her, the details did not matter. All she knew was that humans had brought destruction to her world. While other Valari tried to rebuild their lives peacefully, Lyra chose a different path. She joined the Valari Resistance. The Resistance was a group of warriors and survivors who believed the galaxy was still dangerous. They trained to protect their people and defend their world from any future threats. Many members were older soldiers who had fought during the war. Lyra was different. She joined them when she was still very young. At first, the leaders were unsure about accepting her. The Valari rarely encouraged anger or revenge, but Lyra was determined. She trained harder than anyone else. She learned how to use energy blades, long-range pulse weapons, and stealth technology. She studied battlefield strategy and survival tactics. Her movement became fast and precise. Her focus was unbreakable. Years passed. By the time she reached adulthood, Lyra had become one of the most skilled fighters in the Resistance. But there was one thing everyone noticed. She never laughed. She rarely spoke unless it was necessary. And whenever the topic of humans appeared in conversation, a cold fire burned in her eyes. Among the Resistance fighters, people often whispered about her. Some admired her strength. Others worried about the anger she carried, because anger was something the Valari believed could grow dangerous if left alone for too long. But Lyra did not care about those warnings. In her mind, humans had taken everything from her, and one day, she believed she would face them again. That day finally came many years later. One quiet evening, Lyra was training in a combat chamber deep inside a Resistance base hidden within the crystal forests. The room was large and filled with glowing practice targets. Her energy blade flashed through the air as she moved quickly between them. Each strike was sharp and controlled. Suddenly, the door opened. A Resistance scout rushed inside. "Lyra," he said quickly, "Command needs you in the briefing chamber." Lyra lowered her blade. "What happened?" The scout hesitated before answering. A human convoy just entered the system. For a moment, the room became completely silent. Lyra slowly turned to face him. "Humans?" she asked quietly. The scout nodded. "They sent a message to the Valari Council. They say they are here for diplomatic talks." Lyra felt her hands tighten around the weapon. Diplomatic talks? After everything that had happened? The idea felt almost insulting. "Where are they now?" she asked. "They're preparing to land on the western plains tomorrow." Lyra stared at the glowing targets across the room. Memories of burning cities and shattered towers filled her mind. After all these years, humans had finally returned to Taurellis. She clipped the energy blade back onto her belt. Then she walked toward the door. "What are you going to do?" the scout asked. Lyra stopped for a moment. Her voice was calm, but the anger behind it was impossible to hide. "I'm going to make sure," she said slowly, "that none of them leave this planet alive." Outside the base, the crystal forest shimmered softly under the violet sky. Far above the atmosphere, 3 human ships were already approaching orbit. And somewhere inside one of those ships was a man who had no idea his arrival was about to change everything. Soft violet light spread across the sky as the sun rose behind the crystal forests. The wind moved gently through the tall, glowing crystals, making a faint humming sound that the Valari people had heard for thousands of years. But this morning, the peaceful sound could not calm the tension in the air. High above the planet, 3 human ships slowly moved into orbit. Inside the hidden Resistance base, alarms quietly signaled the arrival of the visitors. Lyra stood in the main briefing room with several other Resistance fighters. A large holographic map floated in the center of the room. It showed the western plains where the human convoy was preparing to land. One of the Resistance commanders spoke. "The human ship sent another message to the Valari Council," he said. "They claim they are here for diplomatic contact." A few fighters laughed bitterly. "Diplomacy," one soldier said, "after what they did to this planet?" Another fighter crossed his arms. "Humans never come without a reason." Lyra said nothing. She simply stared at the glowing map. The landing site was clear. Wide open land. Few natural defenses. Perfect for an ambush. The commander looked toward her. "Lyra," he said, "you know the Western Plains better than anyone. You'll lead the strike team." She nodded once. There was no hesitation in her eyes. "Understood." Hours later, the Resistance team moved silently through the crystal forest. The Valari were naturally light on their feet, and their armor blended perfectly with the glowing environment. Lyra walked at the front. Her senses were sharp. Every sound, every movement in the forest reached her ears. Behind her, 6 Resistance fighters followed carefully. They reached the edge of the forest just as the sky above them began to change. A distant rumbling sound echoed through the air. Lyra looked up. 3 small shapes appeared in the sky, descending slowly through the atmosphere. Human landing shuttles. Bright trails of light followed them as they entered the planet's atmosphere. The Resistance fighters moved into position among the tall crystals near the landing area. Energy weapons were prepared. Communication devices were silenced. No one spoke. The first shuttle reached the ground with a deep mechanical sound. Dust and glowing crystal fragments scattered across the plain as the engines powered down. The second and third shuttles landed moments later. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then one of the shuttle doors slowly opened. The resistance fighters raised their weapons. Everyone waited. The first human stepped outside. Lyra narrowed her eyes. She expected soldiers, armored warriors with weapons ready. Instead, the human who walked down the ramp looked very different. He wore a simple gray coat instead of military armor. No visible weapons. No heavy equipment. Just a small bag over his shoulder. Behind him, a few other humans stepped out of the shuttle, but they remained near the landing craft. The man in the gray coat looked around at the crystal plains with curiosity. He seemed almost amazed by the glowing forest. Lyra felt her anger rise. This was the species that had burned her world, and this man was simply standing there, admiring it. The resistance commander whispered through the communication channel. Now! In an instant, the Valari fighters moved. They stepped out from the crystal forest and surrounded the landing site from all directions. Energy rifles aimed directly at the humans. The humans reacted quickly. Some of them raised offensive scanners. Others froze in surprise. But the man in the gray coat did something unexpected. He raised both hands slowly, not in fear, but in calm surrender. Lyra stepped forward from the trees. Her silver skin reflected the glowing crystals around her. Her eyes locked onto the human. The fighters behind her waited for orders. She walked across the open field until she stood only a few steps away from him. The human looked at her quietly. There was no panic in his face, no anger, only calm focus. Lyra activated her energy blade. The blue light extended from the handle with a soft humming sound. In one quick movement, she pressed the glowing blade close to the human's neck. Gasps came from the other humans near the shuttle. But the man in the gray coat did not move. "State your purpose," Lyra said coldly. The human slowly spoke through a small translation device attached to his collar. "My name is Dr. Elias Ward," he said calmly. "I am a xenobiologist and diplomatic envoy from Earth." Lyra's expression did not change. "Why are humans here?" she demanded. Dr. Ward looked around at the destroyed parts of the plains in the distance. Even after many years, signs of the old war were still visible. "We came to help your planet," he said. Some of the resistance fighters behind Lyra laughed in disbelief. "Help," one of them said. "You destroyed half of it." Lyra pressed the blade slightly closer. "You expect us to believe that?" she asked. Dr. Ward did not look away from her eyes. "I know what happened here," he said quietly, "and I know many of your people suffered." For a moment, Lyra felt something strange. The human's voice did not sound offensive. It sounded sincere. But the anger inside her quickly pushed the feeling away. "Your fleets burned our cities," she said. "Yes," Dr. Ward replied softly. But that war was not what it seemed. The resistance fighters grew restless. Lyra narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" Dr. Ward slowly lowered one hand and tapped a small device on his wrist. A holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed detailed planetary scans of Taurus. Energy patterns moved deep under the surface. Lyra recognized the technology immediately. Planetary monitoring data. 6 months ago, Dr. Ward explained, human deep space sensors detected unusual energy signals beneath your planet's crust. Lyra looked at the hologram carefully. Strange energy waves pulsed deep underground. "What is that?" one resistance fighter asked. Dr. Ward answered calmly. "A planetary destabilization device." The resistance fighters exchanged confused looks. Lyra's blade remained steady. "Explain," she said. Dr. Ward expanded the hologram. The display zoomed deeper underground until it revealed a massive mechanical structure buried beneath layers of rock. "This machine was built during the war," he said, "by the enemy faction that used your world as a hiding place." Lyra stared at the glowing structure. "What does it do?" Dr. Ward's voice became serious. "It is designed to slowly collapse the planet's magnetic field." The fighters around them suddenly grew silent. Lyra felt a cold feeling move through her chest. "If the magnetic field collapses," Dr. Ward continued, Your atmosphere will begin to disappear. Radiation from space will reach the surface. He paused. Eventually, Tar Ellis will become uninhabitable. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. How long? She asked. Dr. Ward looked directly at her. 6 months. The resistance fighters began speaking nervously. That's impossible. Why would no one detect it? Lyra stepped closer to the hologram. The energy readings looked real, but something still felt wrong. Why would humans come here to warn us? She asked. Dr. Ward answered simply, because we're the only ones who have the technology to stop it. Lyra looked at him again. For years she had believed humans only brought destruction. Yet this man had landed on a hostile world with no weapon and calmly walked into an ambush. And now he was claiming he came to save the planet. Her mind struggled to understand it. Behind them, the crystal forest shimmered softly in the wind. Finally, Lyra lowered the blade slightly. Not completely, but enough to show she was thinking. If what you say is true, she said slowly, then you will prove it. Dr. Ward nodded. Of course. Lyra turned toward the resistance fighters. We take them to the underground scans, she ordered. The fighters hesitated. Lyra, this could be a trick. She looked back at Dr. Ward. If he is lying, she said calmly, he won't leave the planet. Then she faced the human again. Welcome to Tar Ellis, Dr. Ward, she said coldly. You have one chance to prove that humans are not the monsters we believe them to be. Dr. Ward gave a small, respectful nod. High above them, the human ships continued orbiting silently, and deep beneath the planet's surface, something massive slowly pulsed with dangerous energy. Lyra and the resistance fighters moved carefully through the crystal forest of Tar Ellis, guiding the small group of humans deeper into the wilderness. Tall, glowing crystals rose from the ground like giant frozen trees. Their soft light painted the forest in shades of blue and violet. The path was narrow and quiet. No one spoke much. The Valari fighters kept their weapons ready at all times. They did not trust the humans, and they watched every movement carefully. Dr. Elias Ward walked calmly among them. Even though he was surrounded by armed warriors, he did not look afraid. Instead, he looked curious about the strange world around him. Sometimes he stopped for a moment to study a glowing plant or examine the shape of a crystal. Lyra noticed this several times. It confused her. Most beings would be nervous or frightened in a situation like this. But the human scientist behaved as if he was exploring a new and fascinating place. Finally, after hours of walking, the group reached a tall cliff made of dark crystal stone. Lyra stopped. This is the entrance, she said. Hidden between two massive crystal formations was a narrow opening in the rock. It was difficult to see unless someone knew where to look. 2 Valari guards stepped forward and activated a hidden control panel. A section of the cliff slowly slid open, revealing a passage that led underground. Cold air drifted from the tunnel. Dr. Ward looked inside with interest. This must be one of your old mining caverns, he said. Lyra nodded. Long ago, our people gathered energy crystals from deep below the surface. These tunnels reach very far underground. The resistance team entered the tunnel. Lights built into the walls slowly activated as they walked deeper inside. The glowing crystals reflected the light in strange patterns that moved across the stone floor. The air became colder, and the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate slightly. Dr. Ward checked the scanner device on his wrist. The energy signal is getting stronger, he said quietly. Lyra felt it too. The deeper they went, the more powerful the strange vibration became. After nearly an hour of walking through twisting tunnels, the group reached a large open chamber. Everyone stopped. The sight in front of them was impossible to ignore. In the center of the cavern stood a massive machine. The structure was enormous. Dark metal towers rose from the ground like giant claws. Thick cables stretched across the chamber and disappeared deep into the surrounding rock. At the center of the machine, a glowing sphere of energy pulsed slowly. Each pulse sent a wave of vibration through the cavern walls. The resistance fighters stared in shock. What is that thing? One of them whispered. Dr. Ward stepped forward slowly. This is the destabilization device, he said. Lyra walked closer. The machine was even larger than she had imagined from the hologram. This was built during the war? She asked. Dr. Ward nodded. Yes, the enemy faction that hid here placed it beneath the planet's crust before they were defeated. Another Valari fighter looked confused, but the war ended years ago. Dr. Ward looked at the glowing energy core. That was the plan, he explained. The device was designed to activate long after the war ended. Lyra felt anger rising again. They wanted revenge, she said. Yes, Dr. Ward replied. If the planet became unstable years later, it would be difficult to trace who was responsible. One of the resistance soldiers walked closer to the machine. How close are we to disaster? He asked. Dr. Ward studied his scanner. The device made a quiet series of beeping sounds. Then his face became serious. Closer than I expected, he said. Lyra looked at him. What does that mean? Dr. Ward pointed toward the glowing energy sphere. The machine is already running, he said. A deep pulse of energy echoed through the cavern again. The ground trembled slightly. Lyra stared at the machine. If it keeps running, what happens? Dr. Ward answered carefully. The device is slowly weakening the planet's magnetic field. Once the field collapses, the atmosphere will begin to escape into space. One of the fighters gasped quietly. Our oceans... Yes, Dr. Ward said. They will slowly disappear. Radiation from a nearby star will reach the surface. Life on this planet will not survive long after that. Silence filled the cavern. The Valari had survived war. They had rebuilt their cities. But this threat was something completely different. It was not an enemy army. It was a destruction of the entire world. Lyra clenched her fists. Can't be stopped? She asked. Dr. Ward studied the machine again. Yes, he said slowly. But it will not be easy. The resistance fighters looked at him. What needs to be done? Lyra asked. Dr. Ward walked closer to the machine's main control column. This device is powered by a core reactor, he explained. If we can access a control system and shut down the energy flow, the destabilization process will stop. One of the fighters shook his head. This technology is not Valari design. I know, Dr. Ward replied. It is built using a mix of alien engineering. My team has studied similar systems before. Lyra looked at him carefully. You believe you can shut it down? Dr. Ward nodded. Yes. Hope began to rise among the resistance fighters. But then Dr. Ward added something else. There's a problem. Lyra crossed her arms. What problem? Dr. Ward pointed toward the lower part of the machine. The reactor core was located deep inside the structure, surrounded by heavy shielding and thick cables. To reach the control system, he explained, someone must enter the core chamber. Lyra looked at the narrow opening that led inside the machine. What happens inside the chamber? Dr. Ward's voice became serious again. The energy levels are extremely unstable. Radiation, heat, and magnetic storms are building inside. One fighter frowned. That sounds dangerous. Dr. Ward nodded. It is very dangerous. Lyra stepped closer to the machine. How dangerous? Dr. Ward looked at her. If someone goes inside to shut down the reactor, they may not survive the process. The cavern became completely silent again. The fighters exchanged worried looks. No one spoke. Finally, one of the Valari soldiers said quietly, there must be another way. Dr. Ward shook his head slowly. I'm afraid there isn't. Lyra studied the machine. The glowing sphere pulsed again. The vibrations felt stronger now. How long do we have? She asked. Dr. Ward checked his scanner once more. If the energy buildup continues at this rate, he said, maybe 6 months before the magnetic field collapses completely. Lyra turned toward the resistance fighters. They were brave warriors, but none of them had experience with alien reactor systems like this. She looked back at Dr. Ward. You said humans have studied this technology before, she said. Yes, he replied. Lyra's voice was calm. Then you will guide us through the shutdown process. Dr. Ward hesitated for a moment. Then he shook his head gently. It's not that simple. Lyra frowned. What do you mean? Dr. Ward looked toward the core chamber. The control system must be operated from inside the reactor chamber. The process requires direct manual access. He paused. And the system is extremely complex. Lyra slowly understood what he was saying. You mean? Dr. Ward nodded. I'm the only one here who knows how to shut it down safely. The resistance fighters looked at him in shock. Lyra stared at the human scientist. You're saying you have to go inside that chamber? Dr. Ward met her gaze calmly. Yes. One of the fighters stepped forward. That's suicide. Dr. Ward gave a small, thoughtful smile. Not necessarily. Lyra studied his face carefully. The strange thing was that he did not look afraid. In fact, he looked completely calm, almost determined. Why would you do this? Lyra asked. Dr. Ward looked around the cavern. The glowing crystals, the ancient tunnels, the living planet above them. This world is beautiful, he said quietly, and it deserves a future. Lyra felt something unexpected in her chest. For years she had believed humans only destroyed things. But now one of them was calmly preparing to risk his life to save a planet that was not even his home. She did not understand it. But for the first time, her anger toward humans felt slightly weaker. Behind them, the giant machine pulsed again with growing energy. And deep inside the reactor core, a dangerous decision was waiting to be made. The massive destabilization machine continued to pulse with energy. Each wave shook the ground beneath Lyra's feet. Small pieces of crystal rock fell from the ceiling and bounced across the stone floor. The reactor core was becoming more unstable. Everyone in the chamber could feel it. Lyra stood near the machine, staring at the narrow entrance that led into the core chamber. The opening was surrounded by glowing warning lights and thick metal plates. Inside that chamber was a control system that could shut down the machine. But the radiation and energy storms inside were extremely dangerous. Only one person there knew how to operate the alien reactor, Dr. Elias Ward. The human scientist stepped closer to the machine and studied the control panel built into the outer structure. His small scanner device projected lines of data across the air. Lyra watched him carefully. You are certain this will work? She asked. Dr. Ward looked up from the scanner. Yes, he said calmly. If I can reach the main control system inside the chamber, I can shut down the reactor. One of the Valari resistance fighters shook his head. The energy readings are rising every minute, he said. The machine could overload at any moment. Dr. Ward nodded. That's why we need to move quickly. Lyra crossed her arms. And if something goes wrong... Dr. Ward paused for a moment before answering. If the reactor becomes unstable while I'm inside the chamber, there may not be enough time to escape. The resistance fighters looked uneasy. Lyra looked at the human again. You are risking your life for a planet that is not even your home. Dr. Ward smiled slightly. Sometimes the right thing to do isn't about where you come from, he said. Lyra did not respond, but his words stayed in her mind. For many years she had believed humans were selfish and destructive. Yet this man had walked into danger without hesitation. He could have stayed safely on his ship in orbit. Instead, he had come down to a hostile world filled with people who hated him. And now he was preparing to enter a deadly reactor chamber to save that same world. Lyra did not understand it, but something inside her was slowly changing. Dr. Ward finished checking the scanner. The control system is located about 30 meters inside the chamber, he explained. Once I reach it, I will need several minutes to disable the reactor. One of the fighters asked, What happens during those minutes? The machine will resist shutdown, Dr. Ward said. Energy surges, magnetic storms, possibly structural damage. Lyra looked at the narrow doorway again. You'll be alone inside? Dr. Ward nodded. Yes. She frowned. There must be a safer way. Dr. Ward shook his head. The system requires manual control from inside the chamber. Remote shutdown is impossible. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small metal device. This is a stabilization tool, he said. It will help me control the reactor's energy flow while I shut it down. Lyra studied the device carefully. It looked fragile compared to the enormous machine in front of them. You believe that small tool can stop this entire structure? Dr. Ward gave a quiet laugh. Human engineering can be surprising sometimes. The resistance fighters prepared the area near the chamber entrance. Energy barriers were activated to protect them from sudden surges. Dr. Ward walked toward the doorway. Lyra stepped in front of him. Wait! He stopped. She looked directly at him. You know that if you go inside, you may not come back. Dr. Ward nodded. Yes. Then why do it? She asked again. The human scientist looked around the cavern, the glowing crystals, the ancient stone tunnels, the living planet above them. Then he looked back at Lyra, because saving a world is worth the risk. For a moment, Lyra had no answer. Finally, she stepped aside. Dr. Ward nodded respectfully and entered the core chamber. The heavy door behind him slowly closed. Through the observation window, Lyra could see the inside of the chamber. Bright streams of energy moved across the walls like lightning. The reactor core glowed with powerful light. Dr. Ward carefully moved through the chamber, using the stabilization device to protect himself from the energy waves. The ground trembled again. One of the resistance fighters checked a monitoring screen. Energy levels are increasing, he warned. Lyra watched the human scientist. Dr. Ward reached the main control console deep inside the chamber. He placed a stabilization tool into a slot in the control panel. Immediately the machine reacted. A loud alarm echoed through the cavern. The reactor core flared brighter. Energy bolts flashed across the chamber walls. Reactor resistance detected, one fighter said. Lyra's eyes stayed fixed on the window. Inside the chamber, Dr. Ward worked quickly. His hands moved across the alien control system, typing commands and adjusting energy flows. Sweat appeared on his face as the chamber grew hotter. Suddenly, a powerful shockwave burst from the reactor. The entire cavern shook violently. Large cracks appeared in the walls. Structural damage detected, another fighter shouted. Lyra grabbed support rail to keep her balance. Inside the chamber, Dr. Ward was thrown against the control console, but he stood up again. He continued working. Minutes passed. Each second felt longer than the last. The reactor core flashed wildly as it fought against the shutdown commands. Energy overload approaching, a fighter warned. Lyra's heart pounded. She watched the human scientist struggle to stabilize the machine. Then the control screen outside showed something new. Shutdown sequence starting, one fighter said. Hope filled the chamber. Inside the reactor room, Dr. Ward activated the final command. The stabilization device glowed brightly. The reactor core released one final massive pulse of energy. Then the light slowly faded. The humming sound of the machine grew quieter. The ground stopped shaking. Silence filled the cavern. The destabilization device was no longer active. The reactor had been shut down. Cheers broke out among the resistance fighters. Taralis is safe. Lyra did not celebrate. She looked at the core chamber window. Inside, Dr. Ward was lying on the floor near the control panel. He was not moving. Open the chamber, Lyra ordered. The heavy door unlocked. She rushed inside with two fighters. The air was still warm from the energy surges. They reached the human scientist. Dr. Ward slowly opened his eyes. Lyra helped him sit up. "You're alive," she said. He gave a tired smile. "Of course," he said softly. "I still need to write my report." The fighters laughed with relief. Together, they helped him leave the chamber. Months later, the planet Taralis looked different. The destabilization device had been completely removed by a joint team of Valari and human engineers. The planet's magnetic field was stable again. Life was slowly returning to the damaged regions of the world. Near the crystal forest, a new monument had been built. It was simple, a tall statue of a human standing beside a Valari, not as enemies, but as allies. Lyra stood quietly in front of the monument. Dr. Elias Ward had returned safely to his people, but the Valari never forgot what he had done. For the first time in many years, Lyra no longer felt the burning anger that once controlled her life. The human had proven something she never expected. Humans were not only warriors. Sometimes they were also the ones willing to save a world that was not their own. Lyra looked up at the stars above Taralis. Somewhere out there, human ships were traveling through the galaxy. And now, when she thought about them, she no longer felt rage. She felt something new,